Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
It is 8:06, our fourth hour here. Go ahead and subscribe to that podcast and download it, will you? So you can listen to every bit that you missed. Coming up in 30 minutes, Molly Hemingway will be our guest. It's Larry O'Connor with Julie Gunlock. Julie, you ready to get going
Good
here
morning.
on this amazing get going? We've been going for 3 hours.
Yeah, what are you talking
wrap
about?
things up here in our final. It's the big 8 o'clock hour, and we're joined by
is.
J. Christian Adams, Public Interest Legal Foundation. He used to work in the Justice Department. He would investigate crimes against voting rights. And Christian, it's funny. I see this story coming out of Pennsylvania that PILF is looking at. 2024 election, several Pennsylvania Trump supporters received death threats in the mail. And I would think this is the sort of thing that law enforcement would be all over when it comes to voter integrity and voting rights. There's plenty of laws on the books that prohibit this sort of behavior. So what happened in Pennsylvania when people started receiving these death threats?
Well, good morning, Larry. Virtually nothing, and that's the problem. These were literally letters sent to people's homes with big block letters on the envelope, like from, Bedlam. And they were addressed to neighbor, and they said, "We notice you have a Trump sign, so we're going to come in the dead of the night. We're going to come in a cold winter night. We're going to shoot your cat, your family, and more." And these were stamped and put in the U.S. mail and sent to people who had Trump signs, which, of course, Larry, means their houses got cased beforehand, right? And nothing happened. The U.S. Postal Inspector did nothing. Josh Shapiro, the governor, is very hot on political violence. Well, they've done nothing. The state police have done nothing. We all know what would happen if these were Harris supporters who got the letters, but nothing has happened.
It says that in this article that I'm reading, several Pennsylvania officials refused to do anything, and then down lower it talks about how it's hard to trace physical letters, unlike an email or something. I mean, is that true? I mean, what kind of excuse is that? I'm just trying to understand. Are they refusing to do something because there's legitimately nothing they can do, and is that true? Can you figure out a way to trace these letters?
Julie, it's hard but not impossible. After all, there's an FBI lab. There's DNA when you lick an envelope. There's fingerprinting on envelopes. There's also cameras everywhere now, so they can lock this down to what boxes got dropped in. They could maybe go get ring cameras of all the houses that got letters to see if a blue El Camino was driving by at 2 a.m. in front of all the houses. There's things they could do, but they haven't done it. Maybe Inspector Clouseau works there, or maybe they just don't care.
What laws are in play here? Like I said, I assume this is against the law, and the fact that the police department just decided to shrug about it, that's kind of a systemic problem. Can you give us a breakdown on the law, since this is sort of your specialty, Christian Adams?
Sure. This is why the Public Interest Legal Foundation filed a lawsuit for voter intimidation under Section 11B of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. If you remember the new Black Panther case, it's the same statute that we filed in Philadelphia back then at DOJ in 2009. There's also
I remember it well, but I just want to remind our listeners real fast, because that's where I first met you, because Andrew Breitbart was all over this story back in the day. These were the new Black Panthers who stood outside a polling place in Philadelphia with, batons in their hands, intimidating voters during the 2008 election. And you had obtained convictions on these guys, and they were all ready to get sentenced, and it was Eric Holder, when he came in as the new attorney general, who threw that out, right?
Yeah, he dismissed the case we had against the Panthers. Were in default, and that's the whole ball game. But the laws are still in the book, so why isn't anybody doing anything about death threats to voters who had Trump signs in their yards? These are real people who are really afraid. That's why we took their case and we filed a federal lawsuit to try to actually get to the bottom of this.
Well, and it isn't as though there isn't a reason to be afraid. In Alexandria, Virginia, we had a maniac try to kill 24 Republicans on a baseball field, and we've had incredible threats from sitting members who call Republicans Nazis and all sorts of things, and sort of ramping up what some people call assassination prep. So there's certainly a reason for Americans to be nervous about this. Was there any actual violence against any of these people? Vandalism or?
Well, no, but thankfully in America, the law protects you from threats. You can't
Yes.
actually, that's what makes this country great is
Yes.
we're not like other parts of the world. Like we can vote without fear of being shot in the head. And so that's what makes this so reprehensible this happened.
I understand a federal judge now has granted a victory to you in a motion that allows you now to have subpoena power. What are you going to be asking for and looking for in particular, Christian?
Right. Some people are probably saying, well, who are you going to sue if you don't know who did it? Well, that's what we did. We sued John Doe, and the court in Philadelphia, the federal court, granted Public Interest Legal Foundation the power to subpoena third parties like the U.S. Postal Inspectors, where Inspector Clouseau must work to figure out what file do you have? What leads did you do? What have you tried to do? The local police, who apparently in the newspaper, in the Philly Inquirer, said they've done nothing. They don't care. So, okay, well, at least put it in writing. The Pennsylvania State Police, Josh Shapiro, the governor, is very hot to trot about political violence. So what are the PA State Police doing? We have the power now to do discovery on those organizations.
And you've been tracking basic election integrity problems in the state of Pennsylvania for several years now. We are all very aware of what the Secretary of State did and what the Supreme Court did in the 2020 election in terms of inventing new voting processes with various new criteria for validating mail-in ballots. I think that was the crux of a lot of people's concerns about how that election went in 2020, and we were hoping to have that litigated before the events of January 6th. Is there a systemic problem in Pennsylvania when it comes to their laws, their policies, and the will to actually enforce those laws, as you're uncovering here in this story?
Yeah, part of the problem is the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania is a very partisan organization. To them, the law is a suggestion rather than a rule. I know it says one thing, but we're going to rule the other way. That is a recurring problem with the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. And they have elections this year, so it's a chance to fix it. That's probably the number one issue. But you have a political culture there, Larry, of Philadelphia in particular, where there's no oversight. It's hard to monitor the elections. There's statutes in place that aren't being followed, which is, of course, the key breakdown is when you don't follow the law. And then you have a group of people who are apparently willing to make death threats. So you get this toxic mix in that state.
He is the New York Times bestselling author of the book Injustice, which talked about the Eric Holder Justice Department after the Obama election. And he now gets stuff done at Public Interest Legal Foundation on the ground. You hear a lot of people in the news talking about voting machines and election integrity and this and that. Christian Adams actually does the hard work and gets results. That's why we love talking to him, and we'll follow this case as well. Thank you for joining us, sir. Always good to talk to you.
Thank you, Larry. Bye-bye.
That's Public Interest Legal Foundation. If you want to support what they're doing there, they could use your support.